Hello everyone, thanks for joining today's webinar and panel discussion, How to Optimise Influencer Activity Ahead of Q4. My name is Francesca Dakin and I'm the Influencer Partnerships Manager at Awin Global. I will be your host for today's Q&A. My colleague Nicola will be moderating any questions that come through during this session. Please type your questions in the Q&A tab at the top right of the screen. These can be voted on and we'll put a few of them to our panellists later in the session. During this webinar, we are going to be looking back at the impact the pandemic has had on the influencer industry in general and specifically trends we've seen at Awin, how this has changed the way we work with influencers, what this means for us going into Q4, and how we can create great relationships and campaigns with influencers that we can take through 2021. We're going to explore this topic with leading industry representatives. We have prepared several questions, but we'd love to hear from you in the audience too. Joining me we have Nick Jackson, Chief Marketing Officer at Orpiva, Anna Torsitor, Head of Business Development and Partnerships for EMEA at Tagger Media, and Alex Chavez Munoz, Talent and Brand Director at the Viral Group. To start with, I'm going to give a brief overview of trends we've witnessed at Awin and in the wider industry. 2020 has been a roller coaster to say the least. The COVID-19 pandemic led governments worldwide to impose lockdown restrictions, tell people to stay at home, wear masks, and in some cases, learn how to wash hands. The stay-at-home guidelines led people to turn to social media for entertainment in unprecedented volumes, with TikTok downloads growing by 12% in March alone, hitting 2 billion downloads. Older people and people that have never used social media platforms or shopped online began to do so. At Awin, we saw the biggest year-on-year sales growth when lockdown was announced, with sales rising 121% in April. This continued into May, and although we see growth stabilising since lockdown measures have been eased, this trend could continue, especially with impending lockdowns going forward. The changes to our daily lives were bound to change the way we shopped. For example, influencers who may have previously only created fashion content had to change up the game. I'm not sure about you, but I quickly went from buying everyday outfits to almost exclusively comfies and sportswear pretty quickly once lockdown began here in the UK. Beauty influencers really thrived during the pandemic. Everyone seemed to decide they wanted a new skincare routine, the more steps the better, and lifestyle creators gave us home styling inspo, inspiring many to rearrange their space and partake in some DIY, reflected in 422% growth in the home and garden category. The biggest growth we saw was in the white goods section, which lifted 3,095% year on year, driven by a surge in purchases from people revamping kitchen and cleaning appliances. Another increase that doesn't surprise is the wine, spirits and tobacco sector, which increased 422% year on year. With pubs and bars closed, we had to get creative, becoming mixologists and wine connoisseurs. As a result, online retailers struggled with demand, which according to IWSR jumped 50% in the first week of lockdown in March. One of the biggest success stories we've seen across affiliate verticals is the erotic category, which lifted 2,037% year on year. Alongside this, the lingerie category also thrived, lifting 318%. Companies in these sectors ramped up their influencer activations, and it shows in the numbers. With the pandemic came uncertainty. Many whose job security was affected looked to other sources of income. In the last few years, influencer culture had become mainstream. More and more people are aware of the earning power content creators have. As a result, we've seen a steady stream of people looking to monetize their content. In line with the wider network, we saw an increase in influencer signups, with a spike in mid-March rising into April by 1,676% year on year, continuing to lift into May and levelling out into August. According to eMarketer, at the start of lockdown, investment in campaigns slowed down significantly in March and April. Influencers who relied upon paid posts were now looking to earn more through affiliate links. Just before we get into our panel discussion, I've got a few points I'd like to leave you with. The pandemic led audience engagement in social content to grow exponentially, driving brand discovery and new customers. The value of this media is huge. As a result, influencers expect to be paid. Gifting alone won't guarantee content. Therefore, ahead of Q4, brands should build this into their budgets. Also, authenticity is key. I'm sure we've all groaned at the sight of a misplaced hashtag ad at some point scrolling through Instagram. Brands should be sure they are partnering with influencers that have an affinity to them. 2020 has been a turbulent year for sales performance across every sector, with unpredictable changes in trends. However, positive impacts we can take from the uncertainty is that increased growth has been online, and the lipstick effect. Whilst consumers pull back on spend, they still treat themselves to little luxuries, and we can expect that to continue for Black Friday and Christmas. And of course, disclosure continues to be a hot topic in the influencer space. New research undertaken by Awin has found that more than 3/4 of influencer adverts on Instagram have the disclosure hidden somewhere in the post. In response to growing demand from regulators in the US and UK, increasingly calling out influencer and publisher non-compliance, we've launched Admission, an industry-first multi-network advertising disclosure tool, allowing influencers to customize the disclosure text they wish to display on all domains. According to the ASA, it is your responsibility to know who is promoting your products, where they are promoting them, and what your affiliates are following the advertising rules. Now, without further ado, here's the panel. We've got Nick from Orpiva, a full-service platform for brands, influencers, and consumers. They run end-to-end campaigns for premium and luxury brands who are looking to create immersive and authentic product experiences. Then we have Anna, Head of Business Development at Tagger Media. Tagger is the all-in-one premium influencer marketing platform and social media listening tool, and it's really easy to use, I would know. And then we have Alex, Talent and Brand Director at The Viral Group. The Viral Group is disrupting the influencer space, delivering global campaigns with their impressive talent roster. Hi guys, thank you for joining today's webinar. Let's get things started. So I'm going to start with Nick, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So how do you think working with influencers can support advertisers recovering from the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, you showed some really interesting stats there, actually, showcasing different verticals, different growth, etc. I think on the ground, we've got a sort of variety of different clients. Each of them have had, with this big change in sort of behavior due to sort of lockdown, I think everyone's had different challenges. I think if anything, it's shown the value of what influencer marketing can produce, not just in terms of the sort of hard metrics, but also the way in which they can support brands faced with all sorts of different challenges, whether it's struggling in terms of their store closures and looking to communicate information, or not being able to create content because everyone's in lockdown. So I think in terms of how how influencers can sort of support advertisers, if anything, it's shown the benefits of having those relationships. I'm really keen to hear what the other sort of panelists' opinions are on this. But I think, assuming that audiences are really well aligned between the influencer and the brand, it's a great way, they'll know the customer's pain points better than anyone else. So it's a great way to sort of build those relationships, and definitely see a lot more of that, following the pandemic in the state we're in now.
Definitely. Thanks for that, Nick. Anna, what are your thoughts?
I feel like a lot of my answers might be wrapped up in one kind of one point, which is that in my opinion, as much as people will often say that influencer marketing is expensive, I actually disagree with that. I think it's one of, if not the cheapest form of marketing that actually delivers a lot of engagement and success. So when you compare it to some of the other ways that we do that, that kind of engagement and interaction with their audience is really priceless, and it does come cheap. I mean, cheap is a bad word to say because that's not how I mean to kind of explain it. But what I'm trying to say is that I think we need to get it out of our head that influencer marketing is expensive. It costs what it costs, and it costs like that for a reason, because you're getting a whole bunch of things from one person. You know, you're getting all this creative and you know, pivoting essentially from their home, because they can do any type of content from wherever they are, because that's what we hire them for. So in my opinion, the way that influencers can best support any company right now is by literally just being themselves and doing what they do best. And it's a really great opportunity for companies that have maybe been left in the lurch with some of their production, or have had to completely change their campaign messaging, to rely on influencers, because they're the ones who can turn things around within, you know, a couple of days or even less than that.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And then finally, Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I think touching on Anna's point is that's really valid. What you can do, something, how you can react to the market with an influencer. The quickest we've done anything from start to finish has been 24 hours, but that's having the right influence at the right time as well, that you know can deliver and you know their schedule. You can't ignore it. You know, social media just only continues to grow. It engages with, you know, people from 4 years old to 60. You know, it might feel that there's platforms coming through, like TikTok's obviously gone off, Triller now as well. But I think ultimately the brand, they need to just work with like an agency that, well, the brand firstly has to come with a really clear brief, you know, exactly tell the agency who they want to target, you know, specifically what the budget is, what is their main focus, and what are they looking to achieve from this campaign. And then from that agency should then be able to go and recommend what platform should work, execution on the platform should work. You know, from that, then what level of influencers would be most relevant for them. And I think ultimately going down that route and just not speaking to a talent manager, I'd say speaking to someone that just knows the space, that's the best way that they can really navigate the space, and I think really achieve what they're really set to do, and utilize influencers in the right way.
Perfect. I really agree with you on that brief bit. Yeah. Okay, so for our next question, so how have brands changed how they work with influencers as a result of the pandemic in your experience? Anna, let's start with you.
So I think, you know, Alex will have a lot more insight in terms of the immediate ask and the immediate campaigns that the Viral Group are running live right now. But based on my experience from what I've seen that's being done in the space is that, and I would hope this is true across the board, but Alex, maybe you can tell me if it is. I feel like it's a very positive time actually for our space, not just because it has accelerated and it's growing even faster, but I feel like brands are actually starting to be a little bit more hands-off, which is better. I think, you know, that control factor maybe is loosening up a little bit, because, well, we've all lost control of literally everything in our life. So, you know, suddenly there's this influencer or group of influencers that you can rely on to actually deliver your message in an effective way. And if you've got the right group of influencers, you know, you've got a very short time frame to deliver a whole new campaign message, and you're going to have to be a little bit hands-off. And you're going to have to let them do their thing, because they know how to engage with their audience in the best way. So I don't know, I could be wrong, Alex. Are you seeing the opposite, or are you seeing a little bit more of a creative license being given than before? Alex?
Sorry, I was on. Yeah, no, it's still a bit of a battle, and we've done close to sort of 2,000 campaigns now, and we always start the process with really educating the brand on the story of the influencer, and I think that's really important. Brands need to really engage with what that has been doing and what they've been up to, and how we can implement their product into their story of content. Like, for example, you don't want to use just an influencer that's really big, that's really big amongst 18 to 24-year-old females, you know, to go and advertise Dulux paint, you know, just get her to randomly go and paint a wall. You'd want to go with someone that is probably got a house, is just out their house and creating a house, you know, what's the word, like house renovation page, you know, engaging that way. In regards to sort of being hands off, it's always what we educate the brand on. Let the influencer create the content, or have a half an hour brainstorm with the talent manager, and if they're not providing anything to you, then it's probably, you know, not the voice, it's probably not the right influencer to use. I think that's answered the question.
Yeah, definitely, sounds good. And Nick, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with Anna's point, actually, is, you know, definitely being in a position to be able to have you know, an always on approach with an influencer that a brand sort of trusts is a fantastic position. Obviously, you know, some brands are in, and advertisers are in different positions to others, and it completely depends. A great story that we had during you know, the pandemic, and what we saw quite a lot of, is influencers really prioritizing, you know, brands that they loved, and they were going above and beyond, you know, just doing a content for a brief, but they genuinely love the brand, the people behind it, the story, and actually wanting to support people who have supported them. So I think it's a great, being able to create those relationships, looking at a longer term view, is something that we've definitely seen. It's great seeing the relationship between influencers and advertisers that sort of have that click. You know, it goes such a long way. So definitely agree with what Anna was saying. You know, having the ability to be able to, you know, influencers create content on a more regular basis, and it's great to see. There'll be some great stories on that sort of basis that we've seen over the last few months.
Definitely. Cool. So next question, I'm going to go to you first, Alex. How should advertisers approach influencers ahead of the golden quarter?
I'd say there's probably 3 ways to approach them. I'd say firstly, start early. Everyone is looking to work with influencers for the golden quarter. There's sort of pretty much now, in the last sort of month, we've seen campaigns being booked over sort of Black Friday. In regards to strategy and how you should look to do it, I'd say, yeah, 3 ways. I'd say firstly, there's one way where you sort of use multiple influencers. And with that, using multiple executions as well, and staggering that over a period of time over the quarter. So there is, you know, there's just key shout outs, and there's a level of message and sort of pursuing through a number of different that appeal to your demographic at that time. I really love brand ambassadors. I think that starts providing that real organic touch. So highlighting that influencer that really understands your brand, that really communicates to your audience, that provides really nice content, and having them tee up content over a number of times. And again, using different formats to do that. You know, if you're looking at Instagram, you know, start off with a story and Instagram TV to get a nice message. Utilize Reels. Anytime a platform is launching a new sort of execution on their social media, really engage with that, because they'll be looking to push that further out. We've seen some really strong engagement from Reels. Or the other option is highlight a couple of micro influencers that create really nice content, that are on brand with your organization as well, and then just look to work with the agency to then boost that content and target your audience that way. And on that side, you know, at least with that, you get a level of guaranteed impressions and views. So, you know, those 3 areas, they're quite different, and they each will work really well over having a really sort of impactful Q4. Definitely.
I'm loving the idea of staggered campaigns over Q4. Okay, cool. So Nick, are you all right if we come to you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, great points mentioned by Alex there. I think you know, in a lot of the verticals that we're doing, on average, it's, you know, it's just around 9.2 touch points before people are making purchases. You know, so it's the understanding that, you know, multiple different content touch points are important. I think also, you know, as mentioned before, advertisers are in different positions with different budgets. We've seen some some brands using the sort of paid tools on Instagram to be able to use influencer content on their sort of paid collaborations, sort of boosting from their profile, which is quite impactful. But I definitely think that setting up multiple different experiences that onboard audiences, building that level of trust before putting in a big sort of call to action of purchasing, I think is a really useful touch point, and something to be considered. So I think that's really important. There's multiple different experiences.
Definitely, that makes it super authentic. Agreed. Okay, so Anna, anything to add?
Just two quick points. I completely agree with everything these guys are saying, and especially with scheduling. I think a lot of brands don't realize just how far in advance they need to consider scheduling with influencers, because sometimes you'll message and say, let's work together in December. You're messaging them in September. And if, let's say, you have a product that's launching on the 10th of December, well, guess what? Their entire week is probably taken up with scheduled posts already, and you've already missed out. So I think people forget that they do have content scheduling happening, and that in order to get there early and when you actually want with your timeline, you need to contact them early in advance. And the other thing that I would say is more of a tip, I guess. If you have a software like Tagger, which Alex and the Viral Group use, you can go to the influencers content section and you can look through all their content based on engagement. Obviously, you guys have it too. You know what I'm talking about. You can put in keywords such as Christmas or a certain date range to see what type of content they get the highest engagement on when they're talking about Christmas. So you've got the upper hand when you're negotiating with them directly or an agent by saying, I can see that the highest engagement here is when you're posing with your dog. Would you mind having your dog in the photo if you do the content for us? That kind of thing. So that's just a tip, if you've got access to our software to look through the content.
Love it. I love that dog tip. Thank you. Okay, so next question. What common mistakes do you see brands making when working with influencers? Anna, if we come to you first.
Sure. I think, this is obviously improved a lot, but there's still a lot to be improved as brands get more experienced with working with influencers. I think the most common mistake, which ironically is the biggest mistake really in this space, in my opinion, is that when the client doesn't let the influencer be themselves, when there's too much control and when there is too much focus on things like aesthetics rather than performance of their channels. So obviously it depends on the brief, and sometimes the performance is not necessarily the most important thing. And of course, we need to consider a variety of influencers, making sure that there is a diverse set of influencers too to represent, and it's more relatable. So follower numbers, for example, won't always be that important, but I think, that sometimes there's a focus on really silly things like, oh, maybe their hair is not the right color, or I don't like their style kind of thing, very subjective stuff that actually has nothing to do with how that person as a kind of mini media owner is speaking to their audience. And if you don't like them, if you don't follow them, it literally has nothing to do with you. If they are speaking to the audience you want to be speaking to, and if they align with the brief, then you should be hiring them, and you should let them do their own thing in their own content. When I say that, I mean, again, you might not understand why someone is doing a comedy skit with, I'm just going to do this, have a prop with aloe vera. This is so random. But, if I'm an aloe vera influencer, just because you don't follow me or understand aloe vera, but your product has aloe vera in it, then you might not know how I can make an engaging post. So you should just let me do my thing, because I know what my audience is looking for. And Samira from Alpha Foodie, for example, does this really well with food and literally stuff like aloe vera. She creates these beautiful, colorful videos and images, and just brings like literally anything you give to her to life in a totally different way. So if I was briefing her, I probably wouldn't explicitly say too much. I would just say, here are the key kind of hashtags and tags I want you to do, and this is the brief, but show me what you can do. So I would say, the most common mistake is being too directive and too controlling when it should be the opposite.
Definitely, I agree. Especially, you know, they're creators. We like working with them for their creativity.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there with the most random examples.
Oh no, loved it. And then Nick, can we come to you, please?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess a lot of the time we hear, we hear, we're a brand, we want to work with influencers. We've not done it before, and I want X amount of return for doing one activation, and it's only based on a transactional sort of ethos and sort of transactional frame of mind. I think yes, influencers can bring in great returns in terms of businesses that put influencers at the forefront and they're social first and they want to activate influencers. I think one of the biggest mistakes is to ignore the value, the huge amount of value that influencers can bring to a brand. I sort of touched on the content touch points before people making a purchase previously, but I think one of the biggest mistakes is only thinking about influencers as an independent channel. Where it's sort of amazing, we've seen some amazing results, is when it complements additional sort of KPIs that a brand are working towards. So what's really exciting from our side of things is really understanding what a brand's looking to achieve, understanding the audiences, understanding what their the goals are over the next quarter, and looking at how you can create a influencer strategy that fits around that those KPIs. So that's what's really exciting from our side of things. We do a lot of have had a lot of conversations with clients who are looking at just looking at a sort of one-off tunnel vision approach of we want sales on one day, but taking a sort of longer term approach is definitely something that we were always encouraged, and it's definitely one of the key things that we have conversations with clients around.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of success where we've got clients who kind of want to keep doing campaigns. It just builds up the kind of authenticity, and it's really great. Okay, and then Alex, last but not least, what common mistakes do you see brands making?
Yeah, it's sort of touching on what Anna said again, really, and we did mention it before, but it's that sort of element of control. I think if you just got you scale the brief back to just a few bullet points, people see through in content if it feels sponsored straight away. So if people sense it instantly when they look at it, and it's one swipe or one click away. So to keep that level of authenticity so relevant and right for the influencer will only benefit the brand, because the person who follows them and knows them will straight away engage and just want to understand more. So that's really important. As well, like we utilize Tagger, and that also highlights what posts have been the most engaging over that influencers, over what what Anna was saying, over a particular period. But we can showcase a brand the most viewed or most engaged post that influencer has had, whilst their social profile's been up, and straight away that sort of eliminates the sort of creative that you can choose, and it will highlight what's worked well in the past. But yeah, I think ultimately you need to be working with someone that knows that influencer or knows the space, that can really educate the brand on the best way to work with them, and it needs to come up, the influencer or the agent needs to come up with the creative that will get the best results. So leave it to them, and it's not TV advert, that TV's there for a reason. Showcase it that way. Use this as a way to jump into someone's influence and their influence they have over their audience.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a lot more relatable. Okay, and that leads us nicely into our next question. So how can influencers best retain engagement whilst still disclosing sponsorship? I'll come to you first, Nick. Ooh, Nick, you're on mute.
I am indeed. Sorry, thank you. So it's a great question. I think in my opinion, I think it's a great opportunity. I don't think there's anything, a lot of work kind of talk about ASA guidelines and making sure things up front, which is obviously a really important part. But, a huge buzzword is obviously authenticity, but it's a buzzword for a reason. You know, what are the kind of campaigns that we love to be working in, is, okay, great, we might be working with a beauty campaign, for instance, and actually giving influencers, an open brief like the guys mentioned, but, you might have some makeup products. Let's just take makeup as an example. It's not just about a product looking shiny and pretty in an Instagram post. It's, having a genuine opinion on which product might suit X influencer the best, and also which one might not. Someone might not want a specific product because it doesn't match their skin tone, or the ingredients of a product aren't something that they might have sensitive skin. So it's actually educating their audiences on a product range is obviously a fantastic opportunity, but taking that approach by giving influencers the power to be able to authentically communicate their voice, their opinion to their audience, is something that we see as a great opportunity. So I think more content based on that approach is something that's particularly exciting, and actually an opportunity, and produces great engagement as well.
Definitely. Okay, then Anna, coming to you next. How can influencers best retain that engagement while still disclosing sponsorship?
Just what I said earlier. I think the classic of just be authentic, being themselves, natural and uncensored is, I think, an even bigger buzzword at the moment. Everyone's sort of opening up a bit more, and you see these home and interiors influencers also opening up about money and renovations, which I think is really great. I think we need to talk about money more. I was working with a few banks in my previous role at Mediacom, and they were just kind of getting into this space, but there was a lot of compliance, risk assessments that needed to be done. So I think what's good is that what we're seeing is a lot of long-term partnerships are starting to be formed, and influencers are thinking more long-term too in terms of their own persona and brand. And so ultimately there's a lot of influencers out there that are maybe doing things not in the right way, but then there's a ton that are, and so brands just need to carefully pick. Like I always say, that's the most crucial part of a campaign process. Pick the right ones to work with, because even if they've never used your product, they will then ask to try it before they actually commit to the campaign. So if they don't like it, then they're not going to promote it. But if they do like it, then they understand they can be authentic, and they can really convey more information about that product or service to their followers, because their own reputation is at risk. So yeah, I would just say, uncensored, natural, and being themselves.
Definitely. I think we can all tell when someone isn't doing that. So yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, definitely.
And then Alex, coming to you.
Yeah, I think everything's sort of been, I'd say know the schedule, really understand what the schedule the influencer has and what other promotions they have. Work with someone, at least break it up at least a week from their previous sponsored post. With all of our influencers, any talent that we look to work with, we'll always put together that schedule. So stay clear of that. I would also say, yeah, everyone sort of mentioned before, but just be in line with their story, be in line with their content. If you get that right, and if you plan well at the start, you don't want to be working with an influence at the end where everything's been misconstrued and the communication wasn't right at the start, because then that's when it gets tricky, because there'll be a lot of back and forth on changes and edits, and then that again will probably ruin your relationship with that influencer. So I think as well, the brand needs to bear in mind that influencers talk to each other too, and if you're that brand that has a relationship with them and lets them flow and do their thing, that will only benefit you across the community.
Definitely. Love it. Okay, guys, so a bit of a juicy one here. What's been your favourite standout influencer campaign for innovation? I'm coming to you, Anna, first.
Oh, I was really excited about this one because I had to really think about it, because if I'm honest, I feel like I haven't seen that many kind of innovative campaigns, which I think is okay. I think it's great that influencers are being worked with in the space exactly how they should be, and kind of unchanged really. I guess, online shopping has obviously accelerated, so they are perhaps working with more partners to do with those kind of verticals. But I would say my favorite campaign, and this is in the States actually, but it's not really a campaign, but it's just something that I think is really awesome when it happens, when a brand really jumps at the opportunity to really infiltrate that influencer's audience, because they recognize the value that that person is bringing to their brand. And if you miss that boat, it's really a mistake. So mine is Charli D'Amelio and Dunkin' Donuts. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but it's really simple, right? There was just a type of drink mix that she liked, and her followers and fans knew what that was. So they would just show up at Dunkin' Donuts and they would ask for the Charli, I think it's called. And so they would just have to make it for them. So it was kind of like a secret menu type of thing until the Dunkin' Donuts basically decided to make it official, and they've put the Charli on the menu. So I just think it's really simple, but really clever, because it really doesn't take much from the brand. In fact, they probably had to spend no money or very little money on doing that. And the amount of engagement they're getting from her millions of followers is just insane. And that's gonna, you know, the gift that keeps on giving, especially during this time, because obviously, you know, you think about the foods that you're missing, and, you know, Dunkin' Donuts fans maybe who couldn't go to Dunkin' Donuts during lockdown, and suddenly there's something new on the menu, and it's, you know, connected to their favorite influencer. So that's my favorite one. I really liked it.
Oh, definitely. I love that one too. And then Alex, coming to you.
I'm going to say one of our ones. It was I was really happy with the campaign that we'd done with Vodafone, where we utilised 4 of like the biggest family influencers in the space, and it was a case of we had families, and they were families with kids, and is that family channels in general, their audiences have set times of when they watch them on TV, and family influencers, their audience sort of tend to watch their content as families. So we wanted to tap into you know, mum, dad and kids. So what we did was, with all these big family influencers, we actually secretly trained the parents on how to be really good at Fortnite. And then we took them away to like an underground sort of gaming hub, and they were taught by Ali about how to sort of play Fortnite. From that, there was then some secret hidden camera stuff where the parents just sort of jumped on Fortnite, and like there's one of the mums, Janet, and she was like complete non-gamer, and she was sort of like just taking on 2 of her kids at Fortnite in like another room. And then we got some hidden camera stuff I really liked, because as well, you know, people are nosy, and they want to know other bits about their family and see different things that they don't. You know, that's why they're watching influencers, and that's why they're watching YouTube content. So and yeah, that got we were promoting Vodafone broadband on that, and you know, it got the views across all the different families were amazing, and it actually kept going. The views on YouTube kept going like month on month, just because it was really funny, cool content.
I love that. So cool. I think my little nephew would be horrified if I beat him at Fortnite.
That's what they all were like. It was brilliant. It was so funny. Like the hidden camera bits were the best.
Yeah. Oh, love it. All right, Nick, coming to you.
Yeah, I love that, Alex, by the way. So that's awesome. I definitely, you know, creating a more integrated, connected influencer sort of experience is definitely, this is more fun, it's more engaging, gets much better results. Couldn't agree more. That's awesome. I think for me, there've been a couple, but for me, I think the best, most innovative concept that was so good. My football team actually sent me a link on this, but it's something called Stevenage Challenge, which was by Burger King, which you know, they really wanted to engage audiences who are sort of digitally focused online. And what they did was they sponsored Stevenage Football Club, so like a League 2 football club who are at the bottom. They got a really cheap entry into you know, a football team. It wasn't for the fans, you know, as you would traditionally sponsor a team. It was actually because on FIFA, Stevenage are also playing, you know, in FIFA along with all the other sort of, you know, all the other teams. And what they did was their mission was to turn Stevenage Club into the biggest online team through the power of video gaming and social media. So what they did was they empowered sort of, you know, FIFA influencers on Twitch and YouTube and across the board, and encouraged people to upload a goal every time it was scored, and they would, you know, redeem a Whopper or you know, some chips, etc. And it was an unbelievable success. You know, they became like the most used team on career mode on Twitch, which is phenomenal. And you know, really interesting. Stevenage actually sort of sold out of shirts, which is you know, unbelievable for them. But it was a really cool way of being able to sort of, again, on Alex's point, you know, create a more connected experience, do something that's really fun, really original, and actually get a bit creative with what's going on. So you know, those formats for me are really exciting. It really pumped at the idea of having that sort of you know, that creating those concepts alongside a brand. It's really fun, but definitely for me, that's got to be up there.
Yeah, there's been some really great gaming campaigns lately. Okay, guys, so next question. I'm going to come to you first, Alex. So in your opinion, what channel do you think performs best with regards to influencer marketing?
What channels? It depends on the objective. So if you're looking for conversions, I would say Instagram stories and Facebook. So Facebook is so underrated in regards to like straight conversions. You know, using the right influencer who has the right Facebook page, crazy results. So I'd say that's really important. YouTube for brand awareness and education on the product is really essential. You're never going to get that connection and that real explanation and showcase of product with you with any other platform than YouTube. I think TikTok's been great for conversions as well, but I'm seeing probably the strongest conversions on TikTok for apps or anything digitally. Where there's just that quick, you know, fun button to bio to purchase, and you know, because of the audience, we're seeing apps perform really well over there. Yeah, I'd probably, it's hard to say on which is the best. It's dependent on the brief. You know, the brief really dictates what format you should be using. So as long as that's clear, you'll get told which platform or format would be most relevant.
Thank you. And then Nick, we'll come to you.
Yeah, Alex makes a good point. It does depend on the brief. It also depends on the type of business that you're looking at. You know, we've worked with, you know, and continue to work with brands that are, you know, worldwide recognized brands, as well as startups as well. So it really does depend on what budgets that you've got available and what they're looking to achieve. We know that, you know, paid social is obviously a very powerful tool. When a brand doesn't have a sort of a vast budget to be able to necessarily commission a YouTuber with 300,000 subscribers, for instance, you know, always a really big fan of being able to create, you know, creating a campaign that can produce a number of different assets. Yes, influencers can be able to sort of compost, but I'm a really big fan of, you know, paid social. And you know, creating multiple assets that can be used across the board in there. So I like paid social. I think it's awesome. A number of different channels are obviously effective according to as Alex mentioned, the nature of the campaign and the brief.
Cool, thanks. And then Anna, to you.
Nothing to add. I agree with everything these guys said, and for me as well, always depends on the brief. I always repeat that there's no one size fits all in influencer marketing. Anyone who thinks that is fooling themselves. Every brief is different. Every approach is different.
Cool. So then, guys, this is a bit of an interesting one. Do you think the rise of TikTok as a new type of social media platform will affect the dominance of Instagram and YouTube for influencer activations? Really keen to know your thoughts on this, guys. So Nick, coming to you.
Yeah, will it affect? I think there's no doubt about it that TikTok is going to have an impact. You know, no matter how you look at it, you know, you can see click-throughs, you know, beginning to come from TikTok. You know, it's if you look at sort of Douyin, you know, over in China, the version of TikTok there, you know, you can see they're a lot more advanced to give you an indication of where they're heading, to where the platform's heading towards. It's certainly not going to be going away. Sorry. So, you know, I definitely see, you know, as more and more users, you look at the user growth of TikTok, you look at the audience demographics, they're increasing, they're growing older in age. You know, a lot more celebrities are coming on now. It's a lot more mainstream. It's not going away. So I think it will more gives more opportunities and options for brands to be able to utilize, rather than necessarily taking away from any one channel in the short term. That's just my input, particularly sort of that's what I think. But at the same time, it'd be interesting to hear what the guys think on this and where their heads are.
Yeah, so Anna, do you have any thoughts on that?
I feel like it depends on the part. There's almost two parts to the question, right? So yes, there's definitely an impact, but I don't think it will have an impact on the dominance of Instagram and YouTube, again, because they're just so different. And like what Alex said, you know, when I used to consult brands, I would always emphasize that any longer message, some kind of explanations, you know, fully embedded kind of branding information needs to be in a YouTube video. And then you've got some really kind of quick fire content, swipe ups, you know, quicker kind of processed journey to purchase on Instagram. So I feel like the age of audiences is also kind of be quite different on these platforms. I don't think you're going to see the same types of people and influencers necessarily big on all of them. I think that's very rare. So I don't feel like the people that are necessarily big on TikTok will also be as big on Instagram, because the audience on TikTok is still predominantly very young. And an Instagram audience is slightly older and demands different type of content. You know, if you just look at yourselves and how you use social media, that's kind of where the answer lies. You know, I don't really spend much time on TikTok. I'm obsessed with Instagram. I buy everything I see on Instagram. I'm literally the case study example of somebody who is very much influenced by influencers on Instagram. And then I go to YouTube when I want to learn something, or if I have a bit more time on my hands. But then you've got gamers on Twitch as well, and I don't even think they're really on TikTok. But you know, I might be surprised. I don't know. We'll see. I just think they're all just so different.
Yeah, I think utilizing like a combination of all of them works really well.
Exactly. And I'm always for that. I think you need a mix.
Definitely. And then Alex, anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely will. Like we're doing a number of TikTok campaigns at the moment. It is very different. I think with TikTok, obviously, it's very content. It's very Gen Z focused. Though it has aged up, I'd say with advertising, it's very Gen Z. So you know that's the sort of audience you're really going to be engaging with there. I think what we've seen strongest on TikTok still has been sort of anything sort of app focused. I think that's where we've seen the strongest conversions. There are a lot of TikTok influencers that have got incredibly big very quickly. One of our influencers got months is on 1 million followers already. So there's a lot of people out there. So I think you would be spoiled. You are sort of spoiled for choice in a way, but then you have to delve deeper into their content, because there is some really random stuff on TikTok. It has its place for sure. It's really cool to use for some really funky, really wacky like campaigns that can go crazy viral. But it just has its place. It's one of those things. I hate to repeat myself all the time, but depending on your brief and your audience, that's what's going to dictate it ultimately.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's super important. Okay, and then my last question before we go on to questions from the audience. So I know we've touched on this actually with Anna talking about banking, but we've seen increased interest outside traditional verticals wanting to work with influencers. Do you think there's any potential there? And I'll come to you first, Anna, actually, on that one.
Yeah, of course. It's kind of one of my favorite topics to talk about, I think, because I feel like there's a whole host of untapped verticals out there, especially automotive. I wish that auto brands were a little bit more open to working with influencers. I think we're seeing a bit more of that. I think the latest campaign I saw was with Mazda and some family influencers on Instagram. And, you know, there's always misconceptions in every industry, but, you know, influencers aren't only beauty gurus or fashionistas. They're astronauts, they're vets, and they're engineers too. You know, some may not even have social channels, but are making a huge influence. Now, obviously, those are a little bit more difficult to measure or report on, but I feel like, you know, the spectrum of influence is just so big that, you know, if you need to reach vets and you need to sell your pet product, and vets are actually the most influential people because people walk into their clinic and that's where they see it, then perhaps you need to talk to those vets in person and actually see how you'd engage with them. And one of the examples is when I worked on Shell, one of their biggest challenges was kind of B2B, and that's again a growing space in this area, where they really needed to reach workers in kind of, what are they called, like workshops basically. So they wanted the workshop men or women to use Shell motor oil over other motor oil. But when you do research on this type of audience, and we did a lot of that at MediaCom, obviously, and you can do a lot of that on Tagger too, is actually look through audience affinities and who they follow, who they like, and how they interact, and where that engagement is. But these guys are actually, or women, are actually difficult to find because they're kind of typical van man who mainly listens to the radio. But we did find a Facebook page called, again, very random name, but it's called On the Tools. And they have, you know, what Alex was saying earlier, Facebook will surprise you sometimes. They had something like 1 to 2 million followers on there, and it was all tradespeople, workshop people. So we did a partnership with them. So that was a different type of influencer campaign, but it was still an influencer campaign, you know, to reach them in a different way. So those are your very kind of niche verticals there, but I think it's a very exciting opportunity for us to explore together with the client, probably.
Yeah, definitely. That's super niche as well. I love that, finding a Facebook page like that one. Okay, then coming to you, Nick.
Yes. Okay. So 2 things that sort of really stand out to me. Firstly, we're in sort of working with a client at the moment, which is in fintech, as we just touched on before, involved in, you know, high level investing, you know, for millennials, you know, a small amount is better than currently, you know, the current rates and things. So one of the key things that influencer marketing and a product such as that has in common is obviously building trust. You know, I think that people, you know, onboarding people into a journey is really important. And where you've got an influencer and an audience, you've got an inbuilt you know, level of trust. And I think what's really, you know, what's exciting about that is, you know, being able to create meaningful content, multiple different touch points, and actually onboarding people in how they are using a product. And sort of the key thing really is making sure that it's not just a one-off activation. It's, you know, someone who genuinely, authentically believes in the product, what it stands for, you know, and you know, more often than not, becoming long-term customers themselves of a product, whether it's fintech or another vertical. It's obviously quite, you know, something that we're definitely seeing quite a lot of, and it's quite important when activating a campaign. Another one is just working from a B2B perspective is actually employees. You know, we're noticing that, you know, quite often it's something that Awin actually smash. You guys do really well. I'm connected with a lot of people on Awin, and they're always sharing company information and, you know, shouting about different things that are really to help, you know, advertisers and publishers as well. And that's a great way to, you know, be incentivizing and creating sort of leads or anything else like that. And I think there are great opportunities that are becoming more and more apparent for businesses themselves from a B2B perspective, and also activating sort of employees to be their advocates on a sort of a more personal micro level. So I'm definitely, you know, excited about where that space can go. And I think there's, as Anna sort of mentioned before we came on, was, you know, there are the right influencer for any brand, and that's what's really, really exciting. And there's a number of different ways and that can work, shape or form. So that's what's really exciting. I definitely think that things are opening up a lot more.
Cool. And then Alex, I'll come to you super quickly before we go into audience questions, just conscious of the time.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, just touching on some of the things the guys said there. Yeah, I mean, influencers, they're ultimately they're media. So that media is going to have the relevant audience, and it doesn't really depend on what platform they're on. Like an influencer can be an influencer on LinkedIn. An influencer can have a podcast that reaches, you know, a different audience, or, you know, that they'll unearth a different audience. So if there's scale and if there's reach, it's really up to the to sort of understand where that audience sits and the best way to engage with that audience. So yeah, like I touched on before, we had a brief come through for a boiler company. So it is we're getting over the last few years, we're getting such very different briefs come through from different products, but there is always an angle. There's an always way to do something. As long as you know your space and marketing and digital marketing in general, you know, there's always a solution, for sure.
I love that, getting a brief from a boiler company. It's really nice to see that, you know, people outside the traditional verticals are really looking to kind of get into this space.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to pass you to my lovely colleague, Nicola, who's been moderating the questions.
Hiya, thanks guys. So we've been having some questions coming through. I think we've got time for 2 or 3. So just starting off with the first one. Do we advise advertisers to scout for influencers as individuals or use agencies for best results? So Nick, starting with you, what do you suggest?
Yep, I actually think there's pros and cons of both, and you know, we work with people that aren't necessarily sort of well versed with influencers, or are, and they don't necessarily have the time, or they want to be able to use the right AI and technology to sort of match their audience to you know, to their best advantage. So I think that, you know, there is no doubt about it. It takes a huge amount of time to be able to, you know, be doing everything on your own. You know, a lot of the time, you know, businesses are, you know, they've got a lot of other things, and they actually would prefer to be speaking to an agency. You know, the likes of, you know, Alex and Anna or I. You know, different businesses can really support a brand. So I know that we've haven't got a huge amount of time. I definitely think understanding the pros and cons of both is really important. What kind of budgets there are available is another really important factor, and sort of matching that to where a brand is or an advertiser is, again, you know, a really important element. So that would be my sort of answer to that. It can work both ways.
Fabulous. I'm just going to move on to the next question. So Alex, from a cost perspective, influencers always seem to work on upfront or tenancy costs. Moving forward, can you see the channel becoming CPA focused to mitigate the risk for advertisers?
Yeah, I can see that. I think we've done a lot. We still do a lot of CPA campaigns as well at the Viral Group. CPA seems to work best on Facebook, I'd say. So that's the avenue to go down. The issue that we have with CPA is that there's a lot of brands that still pay upfront. So if you're an influencer and you've got 10 deals in front of you, you're always going to go for the one where there's the upfront payment. As well with CPA, number of different issues that can affect how well that does, which might not necessarily be with the influencer. So I think definitely, and there's a lot of I say CPA as well, just on another platform. TikTok's really good for CPA too. I think you get a lot of value there. So yeah, for sure, it'll become bigger and bigger, I think, especially as see how the market develops over the next few going into the start of 2021.
Interesting, thank you very much. And Anna, what are your thoughts on bigger brands working with micro influencers?
I actually saw that question and thought I've never actually heard that question before, only because I would just think, why wouldn't you? I always think there should be a mix of every tier of influencer. Again, depending on your brief and budget, as long as you've got someone experienced working on it, they can maximize that budget to work really hard for you. And sometimes that may include micro influencers, even if you have a big budget. And even if you have a small budget, it might include a top tier influencer. You know, it won't be 5 of them, but it might be 1. I definitely think there are benefits to working with micro influencers because they have highly engaging conversations with their followers. There's a lot of conversations happening in the comment section, you know, that influencers with really, really big followings might not be able to keep up with simply because they've got too many. And something else that I've talked about recently is that I'm particularly interested in is dark social, dark posting and dark sharing. I think with the Instagram close friends feature, it'd be interesting to see how influencers start to use these dark options essentially to reach out in a different way to their engaged audience, and how they'll be able to utilize that with brands, and how brands actually get creative with it as well, with like exclusive access kind of ways of doing it, and that's really great to do with micro-influencers. So yeah, I definitely would say all brands should work with every tier of influencer if they can.
That's really interesting. From that, what happens if you're not getting a good return on investment?
Is that also to me?
Yes, with regards to the micro-influencers.
Okay, with regards to the micro-influencers, again, it depends what your objective is. So that will then determine what your return on investment measurement metrics will be. If you are not getting a good return on investment, well, it's like any type of marketing. You should test and learn. So don't start out really big, spending loads of money. Just start out really smart, little by little. Determine, you know, how much you want your test budget to be, and then based on the testing you do with the individuals you select, the ones that perform the best for you, use them again, use them on a longer contract, form those relationships and partnerships with them, and then you will essentially be tracking that return on investment while it's growing for you, and you know, you'll get a bigger return on that. Yeah, I mean, that's what I would say on that, really.
Thank you. And just to finish, we'll do a quick fire one for all of you if possible. Favourite influencer of the moment, Alex?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Your favourite influencer of the moment?
My favourite influencer, Matt Does Fitness. He makes me laugh. It's very family focused. He's sort of doing up his house at the moment. He's very organic and natural. He's just entertaining. I know what I'm going to get with him, and he's just constantly getting just viral content every video he puts up. So if any brand was looking to engage with an audience of 20 to 35-year-old men, he's definitely the one to go for, I'd say.
Fab. And Nick?
My favorite influencer, gosh, my favorite is probably different to what I would necessarily use for a campaign, but I'm really following TikTok at the moment. I just find it quite interesting. It's a really interesting space. And there's someone called Maggie Foster who does impressions and puts some amazing content out there. It's just a personal favorite of mine. She's really entertaining, and she's really, really good. So Maggie Foster is probably my favorite influencer for now, but that's just a subjective opinion.
And Anna, to finish.
I'm going to be honest, that's a really, really hard question for me, because I follow so many different types of influencers and they influence me personally in different ways. I actually follow a lot of people in Australia because I love their beautiful kind of Byron Bay content, you know, dreaming away of a beachy lifestyle kind of thing. But I'm also loving the kind of over 40s, I guess, mum club that's getting really popular on Instagram as well. And I get a lot of my fashion inspiration from them. And I think what they're doing is really cool. And they're more in the micro influencer space, but they're the ones who are working with reward style, and actually, you know, in relation to that ROI question, they're earning a living off of affiliate links. And you guys will probably know some of them, you know, the Fashionable Pan, Mercer 7, the Mum Lifestyled. And I'm really impressed with what they're doing. So I really like to kind of follow how they're working with brands. So my favorite influencers change pretty much every couple of months, to be honest.
I love those guys too. They're really lovely to work with.
Wonderful.
Cool. So thank you so much to our guests for sharing all of your expertise, and thanks everyone for attending today's webinar. Sorry it's overrun a little bit, but I'm sure you can agree it was worth it. So the next kind of the webinar we've got here at Awin, make sure you join it Thursday 8th of October at the same time for a Black Friday focused webinar. We'll be inviting a selection of industry authorities from across the globe to discuss expectations for the year's peak period, featuring a mix of data insight and also expert opinions. This special webinar promises to shed light on the forthcoming golden quarter and reveal e-commerce trends you should be aware of preparing for it.